Michael Denton says it cannot be done.
One can quote lots of examples in the biological realm of things which seem, as it were, beyond the reach of that simple Darwinian mechanism. There's things like the avian lung, there's the feather, there's the amniotic egg, bacterial flagellum. I mean, really a vast number of systems which have that unique watch-like sort of complexity that you find in nature, where in fact to have the system functioning you need A, B, C, D, so forth, all in place, interlocking like together before the thing will function. It's very difficult to see how those sorts of things were arrived at by undirected processes. I mean, you could take the feather, for example. The flight feather is a very complicated structure of tiny interlocking hooks and barbules which hold the parts of the feather together. And it's these tiny little micro-adaptations within the feather which give it its, which adapt the feather for flight. And the Darwinian model of evolution requires that the intermediates are fully functional. And I can't imagine how you can get to such ends without having to sort of go through structures which are really not functional in some sense, in some biological sense.
Reptiles and birds also have totally different reproductive and respiratory systems. In reptilian lungs, air passes in and out of only one tube, which ends in tiny air sacs. But in birds, the air flows continually through the lungs in one direction, through a complex system of interconnected air sacs connected up with its hollow bones. Darwinists claim that reptilian lungs changed into birds' lungs through a lot of intermediate stages. But Michael Denton says half-formed lungs won't work because the transitional form cannot breathe. Any intermediate stage would result in extinction of the species.
Well, the avian lung is an example, like the living cell or like the feather, of a highly complicated system, very, very involved, very complicated, which, as far as I can see, you can only conceive of it functioning as for respiratory gas exchange. If the whole current structure and order of it is in place. It's one of the toughest examples in nature of a highly complex system composed of a whole lot of interacting components, all of which must be there as they are in every single bird's lung before the thing would function. In the case of the avian lung, this is, for me, a very tough nut for Darwinists to crack, because I mean, I can't imagine how that sort of the lung and other analogous things like it could come about as a result of the accumulation of small random changes.
For simple life forms to evolve into more complex ones requires a massive input of new information. A microbe has about 2 books of 500 pages of complex coded genetic information on its DNA. A human has the equivalent of at least 1,000 books. To transform a microbe into a human means adding a whole library of new information. So where does this new information come from? Professor Werner Gitt is a specialist in information theory and a director at the Federal Institute of Physics and Technology in Brunswick, Germany. He says the evolution of complex life forms from simpler ones by selection of lucky improvements is impossible because there is no source of new information.
The biggest problem in evolution is the origin of information. Where is the information coming from? It is impossible to come from a simple living being to an elephant or to a human being. It needs very much more information. And information cannot come by a random process.
Darwinists say the new information comes from genetic mutations that are passed on from one generation to the next. Genetic mutations are random errors, rather like mistakes made when copying a text. According to evolutionists, the most favorable of these mutations are preserved by natural selection.
When you look at the laws of nature and you look at the cosmos, you have these 2 conflicting possibilities. You have the possibility of the transcendent Hebraic God who created the world and organized all the laws of nature to this end, or you have the other possibility that somehow the universe is a living whole, a self-organizing system.
At the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem, Orthodox Jews worship the God of creation. According to the book of Genesis, it is by design, not chance, that we came into existence. Israeli biophysicist Dr. Lee Spetner is uniquely qualified to comment on the role of mutations in evolutionary theory. A specialist in the physics and mathematics of information, he has researched the signal-noise relationships in DNA as a Johns Hopkins University Fellow. He has published in leading journals on theoretical and mathematical evolutionary biology. He believes the evidence supports the biblical account that God created certain basic types which have, through time, diversified as they adapted to their environment.
I really do not believe that the neo-Darwinian model can account for large-scale evolution. What they really can't account for is the buildup of information. It's very improbable that there can be many small steps of evolution, many small changes adding up to one large change. And not only is it improbable on the mathematical level, that is theoretically, but experimentally one has not found a single mutation that one can point at that actually adds information. In fact, every beneficial mutation that I have seen reduces the information, it loses information.